If you haven't already, please go ahead and click on the subscribe button, and while you're at it, click on that little bell too.
What's up everybody, it's me E-Man from E-Man's Movie Reviews, and today we're going to review Venom. Let's get into a quick intro. After Eddie Brock comes in contact with an alien symbiote, he has to find a way to maintain his sanity and save the day. Alright, let's jump right into the good.
The good.
Well, let's cut straight to the chase and go right into Venom himself. I thought that the CGI for Venom was done well enough for the sake of this film. While it wasn't perfect, I thought it was a smart decision to keep the CGI in darker settings. Also, given the fact that Spider-Man could not legally be mentioned or involved in this movie, I thought this film did a good job of working around that. Venom's origin is still preserved as much as possible given the fact that it is still an alien, but more importantly, it doesn't try to mimic or copy Spider-Man's abilities. I appreciated the fact that they allowed Venom to have his own set of abilities that are a little bit more grounded and practical. Probably one of my favorite scenes has to be the San Francisco motorcycle chase scene. I think it's fair to say that Tom Hardy stepped into this role and delivered a very satisfying performance. I think his best moments have to be when he interacts with the symbiote, Venom. For those of you who didn't know, Hardy also voiced the alien Venom too. The relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom have some really funny moments throughout the film. In a sense, they kind of have like an odd couple type of relationship, except Eddie Brock's body just so happens to be the place of residence. Well, that's all I've got. Let's get to the bad.
The bad.
Now there's a lot to cover here, so let's get started. I think the biggest issue with Venom is the fact that it has very little consistency in terms of the direction and tone. It's almost like the movie can't make up its mind as to whether it wants to be a horror or action flick or slapstick comedy. I think a lot of this inconsistency comes in with what seems like a lot of forced humor. At some points of the movie, you'd think that you were watching a remake of Jim Carrey's The Mask or something. Don't get me wrong though, some of those crazy moments between Brock and Venom are actually entertaining, but in regards to the movie as a whole, they simply didn't always gel very well. That falls on the shoulders of the director Ruben Fleischer. He was the director of Zombieland, and if you've seen that movie, then you can see a lot of similarities in Venom as well. Alright, let me go back and address the comedy in this movie. I understand that everyone will have their own sense of humor when it comes to comedy, but I'm just of the belief that timing and frequency matters when it comes to humor. For the movie Venom, I thought that one of the weaknesses of the comedy was that they had Venom, the symbiote, talk a little too much. Venom acted like the comic relief in this movie rather than being that terrifying alien menace he's always been portrayed as. Just think of like when you go see a stand-up comedian and they say a really funny joke, but then they keep running the same joke into the ground. One thing I also found kind of troubling with this movie was the character building. Eddie Brock's character felt rushed and underdeveloped. I don't blame Tom Hardy for this at all, and instead I think this was more of a problem with the writing in this movie. Brock's character goes from being scared to happy to terrified to mad to whatever emotional status that they wanted to randomly put him in. Basically, the problem is that his development didn't transition well given the many different situations he was put in. And Eddie Brock isn't the only victim of this writing either. So is Venom. The symbiote goes through its own changes that also feels rushed and not properly earned. Now overall, the CGI in this movie is not terrible until you get to the final act. Unfortunately, this film commits the same problem that the Michael Bay Transformers movies did time and time again. The main villain in this film essentially looks exactly like Venom, except slightly grayer, not to mention the fact that most of the movie is done in nighttime settings, which makes it even harder to make out who's who during some big fight scenes. I mean, it literally becomes a gooey, nasty, dark mess. I got one more issue with Venom, and I will admit this is totally all on me. It's definitely my own personal issue. I am not a fan of the shift of direction in terms of the relationship that Brock has with the symbiote. For those of you familiar with the comic source material, we know that Brock and Venom bond through their hatred of Spider-Man. In this film, they take Brock and Venom's relationship down a whole different path. Now, I'm gonna go off of what the film itself tries to set up within their relationship, and given that, it still felt like I was watching some romantic comedy. Now, I am not saying that there was anything sexual going on between Eddie Brock and Venom, but the way they were acting so buddy-buddy just felt really off given the character's traditional background. Again, since they can't use Spider-Man or any references to Spider-Man, they replaced that mutual bond with another commonality that Brock and Venom both share. Personally, I thought it was a very cheap Martha moment, and I thought it was a very corny way to have these characters connect. Let's just say it was a very lose-lose situation. All right, enough of that, let's get to the reason.
The reason.
I think Venom is going to be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. When people ask me what this movie was like, there's a couple different ways I'd like to describe it. In one sense, it reminds me of Blade 3. You have some things in the movie that are entertaining, and then you're hit with some really corny stuff that are kind of cringeworthy. In another sense, if we were to talk about the feel of the movie, I'd say its closest comparison has to be that of Suicide Squad. Take however you felt about Suicide Squad, and that's Venom. I use that comparison mainly because Suicide Squad was supposed to, and it felt like it should have been rated R. However, both Suicide Squad and Venom pulled their punches, and it's very noticeable. Also, both movies felt some unnecessary pressure to make their movies have more of that good old Marvel fun and force comedy into the film when it just wasn't necessary at all. Now, in terms of how this movie looks and how it functions, I'd have to compare it to some other movies. I would probably go along with the movie Upgrade, Life, and a sprinkle of The Incredible Hulk. If you've seen Upgrade, which I highly recommend you do, then you've already seen about 70% of Venom, especially given the fact that Logan Marshall Green looks exactly like Tom Hardy. I know the other question on many people's minds is whether or not this was better or worse than Spider-Man 3. I'll say that this version of Venom was way better than the Venom we saw in Spider-Man 3. Actually, you know what? I'll also say that Venom was a better movie than Spider-Man 3 too. But keep in mind, that's a very, very low bar. So when it comes to the rating for Venom, I've got to give it a 6.5 out of 10. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Venom is not really trash. It's not comparable to the likes of the most recent Fantastic Four or Catwoman, as some people have been saying on the internet. It does have a lot of problems, but even despite all that, there's still something there that can be appreciated in the film. There's still some entertainment value that some people are actually going to enjoy. So with that said, I recommend watching this more so as a matinee watch and go in with really, really low expectations too. Oh, and by the way, there are 2 post-credit scenes, so be sure to stay all the way until the very end. I personally really enjoyed the very last credit scene because, well, it had nothing to do with Venom, so whatever. It was really cool. Anyway, are you guys excited to go see Venom? Let me know what you thought about the movie in the comments down below. If you've seen my previous reaction video, I did kind of talk about how I wouldn't mind doing like maybe a spoiler discussion with you all. I'm thinking maybe if we do something like on a Sunday night, if you guys are open to it, we could definitely dig a little bit deeper into Venom. I personally don't feel like making a whole bunch of videos for Venom because I don't feel like this movie deserves that much energy and time. Just my opinion. Either way, you guys let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts were. As always, I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Please be sure to go check out some of my other videos. If you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I've got more reviews and videos to do for you all, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.